What if I told you that an entire civilization built on honor, swords, and tradition was erased in less than a single generation? This is the story of how Japan, once ruled by samurai under the Tokugawa Shogunate, was forced to open its doors to the world by Matthew Perry. How a young emperor, Emperor Meiji Restoration, and how a nation chose to destroy its past to survive its future. From the fall of the samurai to the fires of the Boshin War to the last desperate stand in the Satsuma rebellion. This is not just history. This is transformation. Welcome to History Ledger, where real stories from the past unfold like cinematic journeys. Tonight, we step into the moment Japan changed forever. Japan stood at the edge of transformation. The old order was weakening, and across the land, alliances were forming in the shadows. Powerful domains as Satsuma and CSS no longer trusted the Tokugawa Shogunate. They'd seen its failure, its hesitation before foreign powers, its inability to protect Japan's sovereignty. To them, the solution was no longer reform, it was replacement. Asterisk in Kyoto, a young emperor quietly became the center of a growing movement. Emperor Meiji, only a teenager, but too many. He represented something powerful. Colon, legitimacy. E, return to true rule. The slogan spread like fire. Restore the emperor, and behind those words was a revolution. By 1867, the pressure had become unbearable. The last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshino, made a desperate decision. He resigned, formally returning power to the emperor. But this was not surrender. It was a strategy. He hoped to remain influential, behind the scenes. But his rivals saw through it. They wanted complete control, not compromise, not shared power. Total transformation. In early 1868, tensions exploded into open war. The Boshin War had begun. Samurai marched under different banners. Some loyal to the shogunate, others fighting for the emperor. Brother against brother, clan against clan. Tradition against change. But this was no ordinary samurai war. Something had changed. Imperial forces were equipped with modern weapons, rifles, artillery. Even Western-style tactics. The old sword met the new gun, and the results were decisive. At the Battle of Tobafushimi, near Kyoto, the shogunate forces faced imperial troops. Despite their numbers, they were outmatched. Outmaneuvered. Outgunned. The imperial army surged forward. Victory after victory followed. And with each defeat, the authority of the shogunate crumbled. Asterisk for the samurai who fought for the shogun. This was more than a military loss. It was the collapse of their world, the code they lived by, the system they served, the identity they carried. All slipping away. The shogunate's capital fell without massive destruction. It was surrendered, renamed Tokyo, the eastern capital, a symbol of a new beginning. But the war was not yet over. In the north, resistance continued. Loyalist forces made their final stand. But by 8, it was finished. The Tokugawa Shogunate was gone. After more than 250 years of rule, it had fallen. Japan now stood under imperial authority. But victory did not bring peace, because removing the old system was only the beginning. The real challenge was still ahead. What would replace it? A return to tradition, or a leap into the unknown. The leaders of this new Japan made their choice. They would not resist the West. They would learn from Italiano, adopt its technology, transform their society, even if it meant destroying the very class that brought them to power. The samurai. The war had ended, but a far greater revolution was about to begin, one that would reshape Japan's cities, its people, its identity itself, because the next battle would not be fought with swords or guns, but with ideas, industry, and change. For over 2 centuries, Japan existed in silence, an island nation, sealed from the world, where time itself seemed to stand still. Under the rule of the Tokugawa Shogunate, Japan had chosen isolation. Foreigners were forbidden. Trade was tightly controlled. Even leaving the country was punishable by death. And within this closed world, a strict order defined life. At the top stood the samurai warriors, bound by honor, loyalty, and the sword. Beneath them, farmers, artisans, and merchants lived in a carefully balanced hierarchy. Peace had lasted 4 generations. But peace can hide weakness. By the mid-1800s, the outside world had changed. Empires were expanding. Industry was transforming nations. Steamships crossed oceans once ruled by wind. And Japan remained frozen in the past. Until one day, in Satsuma of 1853, the horizon darkened not with storm clouds, but with ships. Black, towering vessels belching smoke into the sky entered Japan's waters. They were commanded by Matthew Perry, an officer of the United States Navy. To the Japanese, they seemed almost unnatural. They called them the black ships. Perry carried a message, not a request. A demand. Japan must open its ports to the West or face consequences. The samurai, trained in swordsmanship and tradition, suddenly faced a terrifying reality. Their weapons were no match for modern cannons. Their isolation had made them vulnerable. The ruling government, the Tokugawa Shogunate, hesitated. They had maintained control for over 250 years. But now, they faced an impossible choice: resist and risk destruction, or submit and risk losing honor. In 1854, Japan signed the Convention of Kanagawa. Ports were opened. Foreign ships could enter. And just like that, Japan's isolation ended. But the real shock wasn't the treaty. It was what came after. Western powers arrived: Britain, Russia, France, each demanding trade, each demanding influence. Japan was forced into a series of unequal treaties agreements that favored foreign nations and stripped Japan of control over its own economy. To many Japanese, it felt like humiliation. Anger spread across the country, not just among peasants or merchants, but among the samurai themselves. For centuries, they had been the protectors of Japan. Now, they watched as their leaders bowed to foreign pressure. Whispers turned into slogans: Sanji, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, introduced deeper political tension, because beneath the surface, another truth was emerging. The emperor, long a symbolic figure in Kyoto, still existed, and some began to believe he should rule again. Not the shogun, not the old system, but a new Japan united under imperial power. Domains like Satsuma and Sieshes began to defy the shogunate. They modernized their armies, studied Western weapons, prepared for something greater than reform. They prepared for revolution. Tone, reflective, ominous, the Tokugawa Shogunate, once unshakable, now stood on fragile ground, its authority questioned, its decisions criticized, its future uncertain. And across Japan, one question echoed louder each day: if the old order could not protect the nation, did it deserve to survive? The arrival of the black ships had done more than open Japan's borders. It had opened a wound that would soon erupt into conflict, civil war, and the fall of a system that had ruled for centuries. Because the age of the samurai was about to be tested. The war was over. The shogun had fallen, and for the first time in centuries, Japan was united under one ruler, Emperor Meiji. But unity alone was not enough. Because the world outside Japan was still advancing rapidly, relentlessly. And Japan's new leaders understood one thing with absolute clarity. If they did not change, they would be conquered. So they chose something unprecedented. Instead of rejecting the West, they would learn from it. In 1868, the new government announced a bold vision: modernize Japan at any cost. What followed was nothing short of a revolution. Feudal domains were abolished. Power was centralized. Under the state, a national army was created, longer made of samurai, but of ordinary citizens, farmers, merchants, men who once had no place on a battlefield. And then came the unthinkable. The samurai, the warrior class that had defined Japan for centuries, began to disappear. Their privileges were stripped away. Their stipends ended. Their right to carry swords taken. Even their appearance changed. Top knots, once a symbol of honor, were cut publicly, painfully, irreversibly. For many a samurai, this was more than reform. It was the loss of identity. War day. Without their swords, without their status, without the world they had always known. Some adapted. They became officials, teachers, businessmen, but others could not. Among them was a man once considered a hero of the Restoration, Sago Takamori, a loyal samurai, a leader, a symbol of honor. But even he began to see the cost of this new Japan. Too fast, too foreign, too disconnected from tradition. In 1877, the tension finally broke. The Satsuma rebellion began. Thousands of former samurai rose in revolt, not just against the government, but against the future itself. They fought with courage, with discipline, with the spirit of the old ways. But once again, they faced a modern army, equipped with rifles, artillery, and industrial power. The outcome was inevitable. At the final battle, Saigo Takamori and his remaining followers made their last stand. Outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded. One by one, they fell, until only silence remained. With his death, the age of the samurai ended. Japan had chosen its path. Not halfway, not cautiously, but completely. Factories rose where rice fields once stood. Railways cut across the land. Students were sent to Europe. Ideas flowed in from across the world. Japan was no longer isolated, no longer feudal, no longer the same. In just a single generation, Japan had done what few nations ever achieved. It had reinvented itself, from a land of swords to a nation of steel. From isolation to industrial power, but progress came at a cost. Traditions lost, identities erased, a world left behind. And yet, because of that sacrifice, Japan did not fall to foreign powers. It rose, stronger, modern. Unrecognizable from what it once was. Slow, powerful. Delivery, the samurai vanished, but their story became the foundation of a new Japan. In the end, the samurai did not simply disappear. They were replaced by railways, factories, and a new vision of power. The Meiji Restoration didn't just change Japan. It proved something far greater, that a nation can abandon centuries of tradition and still rise stronger than ever before. But here's the question history leaves behind. Was this transformation a victory or a sacrifice Japan still carries today? If you found this story powerful, there are many more hidden moments in history waiting to be uncovered. So make sure you subscribe to History Ledger and don't miss the next story. Because the past is never truly gone.